teaching really is my passion. I just love the students, and I really do look forward to seeing the students and helping them out. Well, as soon as I get a student report saying this guy can't teach, or of course you get some like that, but most of them are happy. So I think I'll stay here.
It came perhaps as a surprise to me that I did enjoy telling people things that I know. And especially the things I'm passionate about, which basically means biology in general. I want people not to be intimidated by biology. I want them to understand that it's exciting. And it's just wanting people to have correct information, wanting them to know, or at least be able to figure out how they could know the answers to these questions. So I just like explaining things to people, and it just comes from somewhere deep within me.
And I got interested in teaching because I got involved with some of the students that would come into the lab for independent studies. And I realized that, I was enjoying myself doing that. So I asked if I could do some introductory labs. And that was my first sort of break in teaching, was to teach introductory labs to biology students, the 2010, I guess it was called introductory cell biology at that time. That was my first experience with teaching, and believe me, it was a very traumatic event. It certainly took a little build up to it. I never realized that there was that much anxiety that accompanied teaching, but certainly you catch on pretty fast that teaching has a side to it that involves a little bit of fear, and certainly that makes you, in some sense, perform a little bit better. But on the other hand, it scares the bejesus out of you.
My mom was a teacher. She asked me to come in once and teach a little section. I think it was a math thing on the Pythagorean theorem or something. And that was my first sort of stint at teaching. And I quite enjoyed it, and she said that the class enjoyed it too. And she commented, just in passing, she said, "I think you'd make a good teacher." I said, "Oh, why?" And she said, "Because you're patient," which I thought was interesting thing for her to say. But the idea of being a teacher hadn't really, wasn't something that was part of what I wanted to do it and aspire to it. I wasn't planning to go on and do a degree and be a teacher or anything like that. But no, I didn't come to this out of some deep burning aspiration to, impart knowledge and so on. I know that that's the case for many people who are kind of called to the profession, and I wouldn't call myself one of those. I do enjoy it very much, though.
I had lots of really good experiences teaching, and I'm not sure my students always had lots of very good experiences from my teaching, but you try to do things that engage people in ways that enable them to develop some skills for themselves and to give them some confidence that they can do stuff for themselves, and keeps everything fresh.
I really love to teach, but I really love to watch people learn. And for me, watching a student get it, those aha moments are really critical and keep me going. And even when a student isn't getting it, I'm always trying to think of what I'm missing and how could I come at it from a different perspective. And so I try to think, outside the cliche box, if you want to call it that, but in a way that might invite them into the conversation.
I think the role of a professor in many ways hasn't changed. The thing that I saw about one of my professors, who I think was not the greatest teacher, but I wondered what he had. He had it, and I think I have it. I mean, I got it. I went searching for it, and I had to search for it, but I found that. And so you have to inspire. I mean, you have to inspire, and you can't make that up. You can't fake that, right? I mean, you have to have it. It's got to be in your blood. If you don't have the passion, kids are going to see that. If you're just up there earning a paycheck and trying to teach it, it may go so far, but it's not going to inspire. The students have got to see in you something that they don't see anywhere else in the teachers.
when students come in, you want to show them the joy and the beauty of the discipline, right? And mouth-dropping awe at how this has evolved over the last few centuries. And to become part of that great tradition, that you're involved in some serious study. And it doesn't actually matter which discipline in a way. I mean, you'll be called to a discipline, but I think just to cut a whole discipline or field off, it breaks my heart when teachers say, "Oh yeah, I don't like biology. I have nothing to do with it. I don't do phys ed. I don't do math. That is a deep disservice to our students. I mean, I think that's the one thing we have to do as professors of education is cultivate an authentic curiosity about everything. And then that invites people in to say, "Look at this. Wow." So that's part of our job, I think.
Like for me, my teachings, really, I always think of it as a kind of it's an excuse to trigger that spark of curiosity or the flame of curiosity. So, and to maybe point to some of the tools that you can use to then satisfy the curiosity, right? But because, frankly, the subjects that I teach, there's only a handful of students in any class who will probably continue their studies in this area. I teach, Eastern religious traditions. Students are often taking it to satisfy a glur requirement, a breadth requirement, and it definitely provides them with that. It provides them with a broader understanding of the world, a proper, it feeds into our values of like liberal education and all of that.
That the liberal education courses are really interesting, because the students are from all fields. They're not majors in fill in the blank. And it forces you to give a lecture that's essentially a public lecture to them because they don't have any background.
One of the challenges that I see in education, and particularly in science and mathematics, is that we compartmentalize. It's changing a little bit now, but we compartmentalize subjects into, chemistry, physics, biology, or English, or, drama, whatever, but we don't bring them together in a holistic perspective. And so for Indigenous people, learning is multifaceted. All things are related and interrelated. And so I try to bring that interdisciplinary philosophy and Aboriginal ways of knowing and learning. I try to marry the two, or at least have them complement each other in a creative way.
In terms of talking about the passion for teaching, then it's trying to equip those students with an instrument, a framework from which they can operate and look through to understand what's all out there. See, all the stuff that you're trying to get across to them. If you're looking at it through a Blackfoot window, hey, it looks a little bit different. If you're looking at it through, an Inuit window, it looks a little bit different. See, and it seems to me my passion for teaching is trying to provide that instrument, that window, that framework for the students to look through. And it's one thing just to look through one window all the time, see, but it seems to me the students' way of knowing and their knowledge would be broadened if you had more than one window to look through.
I like talking to people about things that I have discovered. I had the good fortune to travel a lot, and it's like traveler tales, you come back from any experience, and you basically would like to be able to tell some of the stories of your adventures and experiences with others. And if they have been interesting experiences, people find them interesting. I've enjoyed telling stories, and I think storytelling narrative is a very important part. And so I find that teaching gives me actually an opportunity to share my experiences. And they're basically experiences of learning, right? Because if you're learning something new and you discover, hey, look, check this out, look what I just found, and other people find that exciting and interesting, that's mutually satisfying.
I think it's the inquiry aspect, which is the researcher part of a professor. But you have to share what you discover because you paid from the public purse. You want to share that with the people that actually fund you. And so discovering something's great, but if you don't share it, there really is no value in that. And so I think you cannot separate teaching and research. And in fact, I would argue that the best teachers are the best researchers because they bring that passion into the classroom and share it.
If we go back to what we stand for as a university, I do think it's not just lip service. I do think we stand for excellent research and excellent teaching. I think that's where we're trying to stand. Now, you might argue you can't serve two masters. People might argue, well, no, it doesn't work that way. It can. It depends on leadership. Of course it does. But it also depends on putting your money where your mouth is. So let's go back to the biggest tangible evidence we've got. This university has made a continuous commitment to teaching. And they have a center that is dedicated to helping professors become better teachers, and they have, I believe, still in this university, a fundamental undercurrent. It's part of the culture in this university that if you work here, it's better if you teach well. I think it's part of the ethos of the institution.
I like teaching. I always have. I think I'm a relatively extroverted personality, and extroverts like to engage people about things and tell them stories, and teaching is kind of an extension of that. I'm a geographer. I think geography is fascinating, so I have this innate desire to tell people about geography and to share ideas with them, and hopefully engage them so they can come back and share ideas with me.
It's a reciprocal kind of thing. You're passing on information that you think is very valuable to you, that you're very interested in yourself, and on the other hand, you're getting some feedback from these neophytes that are just entering into the area, and they sometimes come up with very interesting observations or questions that make you sit back and rethink, and sometimes you even go to the state where you say, well, you know, I never thought of it that way, and it changes the way I think about this, and it starts a whole new process within your own mind of looking at something just because it's like lateral thinking, I guess, in a sense, that's been kind of forced onto you by someone that you supposedly are teaching, but in a sense they're also participating in the teaching process too, but it's at a different level.
It's the students who sustain it, for sure. You know, the minute you walk in and you think, you know, all right, you know, this is my job is to inspire you to want to be the very best teachers you can be, that inspires me to be the very best teacher I can be. And I work in the Faculty of Education, I work with amazing colleagues who I think we inspire each other. Like, we work collaboratively. So there are a few courses that I teach where, you know, I'm the teacher and it's just me and my students. But most often it's a group of faculty members and we work together to meet the needs of, you know, about 40 students. And working with people who are like-minded and who, you know, are continually improving their practice makes you want to continually improve your practice as well.
And I think if I were to have a conversation with young incoming teachers or instructors, it would be to say, you know, don't be afraid to put your own flavor into your teaching, and be afraid to even ask questions of your students, to invite them into the conversation. Check in often with them as to where they are. Are you connecting with them? Are they understanding what you're saying? Are you, I guess, inviting them into the conversation? So don't be afraid to check in with your students.
One of my profs told me once long ago, he said, you know, you're always getting 1 year older, but the students that come in are roughly the same age. And so you're always being further and further separated from them. And so I think it's sort of important to try to stay in touch with what your students are like. I think that inspires me to some extent, is to try to get a sense, because I'm curious myself as to what my students are into.
And over the time, there's many aspects about teaching that I really enjoy. The interactions with the individual students was, to me, probably the highlight of the enjoyment of my job, to be able to interact with students on an individual level. And I guess that's why I really enjoyed those small courses, hands-on courses like the EM courses I taught, because I could get to know the students, I got to know what their capabilities were. Sometimes they became friends, although you always had to keep that kind of arm's length distance from them. But that part of the teaching just thrilled me all the time.
So I have many positive experiences about teaching. I have a lot of good feedback. I can think of bad days, but I really have to think and remember them hard. I think one of the things that I missed most when I became president was I didn't have any full class responsibility. And I could have insisted on it, that would have been fine. But the problem is your schedule changes a great deal. And so if you're supposed to meet a class, MWF, at such and such a time, that's unlikely you can do that. So I think the personal satisfaction of teaching is probably a lot of what drives many teachers. To stay current, use the right equipment, make sure their lectures are accurate, control your classroom.
I find it really hard to talk about teaching because doing it, things arise in the course of conversation, in the course of. So I'm very awkward talking about teaching, and I'm interested in the subjects when we're talking together about them. So I'm completely involved, animated, pay attention to the ways we're thinking and researching about whatever's at hand.
To me, teaching is about the success of the students, and I think most of my colleagues are prepared to work really hard to help them, but they have to. They're like the horse you can bring to the water trough, but they have to do the drinking. I think many of us, we really, really work hard to try to get them to understand these concepts and how these relate and try to get them excited. And some do, but it's a struggle. It's always a struggle.
Teaching is very hard. Teaching is much harder than I ever thought it was going to be. It consumes all of your energy, and I think for people who are dedicated to teaching, it can almost overtake many of the other things in your life, because you just feel that you can always do something more. There's always more information that you can pass on, and you're always trying to add that information to what you already have, so that you're bringing the students the latest information. You just feel that it's a compulsion with you, and so it is a very hard thing to do it.
I'd like to be able to develop my teaching. One, so that I'm really comfortable. I don't see myself as a natural born teacher. I work at teaching, and so I like that I have to work at it because it makes me pay attention. But I'd like to be able to bring even more of my own research into it. I'd like to invite students into the conversation. And that does happen, but I'd still like to have more of that.
I think what you try to do is to make relevant what you're doing in research to the students, to try and make that connection. And I think what I saw in my professor, that, whatever he was doing was turning him on, and he was passionate, and I wanted that. I didn't know how to get that. I didn't even know what that was, but I knew it had something to do with what happened behind the door of his lab. And I tried to open the door and bring some of that passion into the lecture.
So I think some of that sense of passion for teaching, I think some of that is innate. And it's very difficult to cultivate it if it's not already there. But it can be directed by assuring the people who do the teaching of the importance of the work that they are doing, and have a sense of respect for the quality of the work that they do. And all of the various teaching programs and teaching awards go some way towards encouraging that passion to be realized.
If there's one thing that I've especially enjoyed, it's when students have come to me when I might run into them in town, or they've just contacted me for one reason or another and said something about what they especially remembered from my teaching. And oftentimes it was how I corrected their English and their grammar. Some students would say I paid more attention to that than their English language instructors did. And the point that I was always making is the ability to communicate is important. If you can't explain something to somebody, you probably don't know it yourself very well.
Yeah, that's another benefit you get from teaching, is you get to kind of follow people from a very early age when they're just making lots of important decisions in their life. And then the other thing about having a long career at the same place is you often see these students come back 10, 15 years later to visit you, and you get to find out about what's gone on since that time and hear a little bit about their lives and how they've developed. And it's kind of helpful for me, or nice for me to be able to compare where I thought they might be at this point with where they actually ended up. And usually it was fairly close. You could tell the ones that were going to succeed because there's something common about people who succeed, and I guess that's a strong desire to do well in life, and they carry that through them as an attitude through everything they do.
I've taught all kinds of classes over the years and seminars for undergraduates and graduate students, and took a lot of pride in a number of students to see them go on. So there's a personal side to teaching, like you find in anybody, and that they are proud of their accomplishments, they're proud of their students, and you may never see them again. But I read about my students all the time. I'm really proud of that.
The satisfaction comes, I've been around long enough that students have gone and graduated and gone on to other things, and then I've occasionally had visits from students who had graduated like decades ago or pop in, and it's always nice when they go, "Oh, Dr. Rodrigues, it's good to see you, oh, I did a degree in something else, but I took 1 or 2 of your courses, and those classes were some of the best I took, or I really remember them," or what have you, whatever it is. Now, they could be just saying this to make me feel good and all the rest of it, but the fact that they've taken the time to pop into the office and share that is very rewarding, because it makes me feel like, okay, so maybe I'm not doing something that's completely worthless, So I sometimes wonder, if I wasn't teaching, how would I feel? And I think I'd feel a little diminished. I must get some gratification from the process of teaching, and I bet you, and that's a personal thing, that I'm getting something out of it.
Well, geography is very good about making sure that former students come back and teach when they advance in their graduate degrees. And so they brought me back to teach archaeology of Egypt. And so it was a really great experience for me to get in front of the classroom and get some experience teaching students. But it was a really good experience, and it really cemented in for me that's where I wanted to be, where the teaching was going to be a key component of my career.